Namaste and in-law catch, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is really special. His name is Rick DellaRatta. He is an independent performing arts professional. He is the founder of Jazz for Peace and Jazz for Peace Foundation. And they've got over 850 grants awarded over the past 20 years. Now, Rick's also a graduate of New England Conservatory of Music, and my wife would like that. She's a graduate of Mussorgsky College from St. Petersburg. She's a piano pedagogue as well. So, Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sam. So
we all have different ways of approaching life and how we garner understanding as kids and how that progresses through life. And what I like to focus on is how people establish that interconnection earlier and hopefully maintain it, or if they don't, how they regain it later on in life. So how did you first begin? I know music has been a huge thing in your life. How did that first begin, and what was the interconnection that drove you to it?
Well, you know,
or maybe pulled you in.
Say it again.
I said, or maybe pulled you in.
Oh, yeah, that's a good terminology. Yes. Oh, well, it does pull you in. There's no doubt about that. But you know, when I was very young, and this goes back to toddler, I noticed that I kind of had my own agenda. I was developing how I wanted to approach each day and get through each day, and it was a little bit like disruptive when I found out, you know, you have to do this, you have to do that. Hey, wake up! Now you have to go to school. Well, what do you mean school? I have a whole day planned. What are you talking about?
Pardon me, but you kind of give the early disruptor a new meaning, right?
Perhaps, because I noticed, like, you know, what are you talking about? I felt like I was fine. I had a day, I had things I had to plan, and now I have to, you know, there's things I have to do. And so it was throwing me off a little bit to have all of these to notice that, you know, there was a little bit of pre-programming going on. And then, of course, when I went to school, I noticed that it was with many kids' lives, and, you know, we were kind of being a little bit distracted or even kind of discouraged from our own natural path, which I felt like I was in touch with as a very young kid. So anyway, I ended up getting back in touch with that to a very large degree when I was about 5 or 6 years old, when I was staying up to try and catch Santa Claus, because I knew he was coming, and the year before I fell asleep. I kept, you know, I pushed my eyes open and they just, you know, woke up the next morning. So I was going to really catch him this time. And I didn't want my parents to know because they weren't too wild about the idea. I was upstairs and they didn't want me sneaking around catching Santa Claus. But a door opened late at night, a big something came into the house, and from my peeking around trying not to get caught, it was a very large, heavy-set man at the back of this doing the heavy lifting, the pushing. And I figured that must be Santa Claus based on pictures I knew. I finally got it. I'm just going to go to sleep now because I can hardly stay awake another second. But that was him. He moved something in the door. I don't know why. I don't know what happened. He was supposed to come down the chimney, you know, all that stuff. But this thing, I'll figure it out tomorrow. So the next morning I came down and there was this giant thing that Santa Claus had brought in. I was like, what the heck, you know? But I figured, you know, he went through a lot of trouble for our specific house. I mean, there's the reindeer, the sled, he's supposed to come down the chimney. This is crazy. I better figure out what this is, you know?
And how the heck did he get a key to the front door, right?
That's another one that had me confused, you know? So I was really, anyway, and so I figure, well, maybe he has a key to all the houses because they just know he's coming. Who knows? But I did know I got to figure this out. So I was trying to figure it out kind of secretly on my own. And then I think somebody, you know, told my mother or whatever, hey, you know, and every time no one's looking, you know, little Ricky goes over and starts messing around like that. So the next thing I knew, I was in piano lessons, which I had said, no, I don't need that. You know, I was fine on my own. But now I was doing, because I was still trying to figure it on my own. Then I had the piano lessons.
So that was a piano that was delivered then, is what you're saying. Okay.
No, exactly.
Right.
It was a baby piano. Exactly. So now it was a baby grand.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. It was a big thing. And they had to, I guess they had taken the legs off and they were somehow getting it through the front door.
Sure.
It was a big deal. And it didn't have to go up any stairs because it went right in the living room. So, but it was a very nice baby grand piano. And what I think it was is that at that time, my father was getting his business off the ground. And there's a lot of bartering that goes on when you're just starting to get started. And I think this piano dealer owed him money. And as payment, he accepted a piano, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? That was my guess. Because we used to get a lot of strange, we used to get a lot of things.
Very fortuitous for you.
What? Well, it was great for me, but I don't think it had anything to do with me. I think it had to do with, because my mother did play the piano and she was a church organist. So, I think he saw it as a good thing to have in the house. But my guess is that this piano dealer needed some legal services. He couldn't pay or didn't, and they had to work something out where there was a barter system. That's my guess,
It's wonderful that your mother was in that place and as a church organist. I had an aunt that was a church organist growing up, and I was fascinated how she could sit in front of that multi-tiered keyboard and the pipe organ that it drove that was just magnificent.
You're absolutely right. And so that was, again, that was a whole nother part of the whole thing. The church also played into it, because what happened was, as I was going on my own journey of improvisation, not knowing even what jazz was, not knowing what, anything was. I mean, I had the pop music on the radio. I had the classical music that I was supposed to study for my teacher. And my teacher, I didn't want to let her down. So I was doing that. She thought I was a prodigy or protege or whatever she thought. So I'm not going to let her down. I don't want to let anybody down here, but I got to figure this out on my own. So now I had my own improvisation. And what happened was, one thing led to another, and I was a paper boy, but I had to quit my paper route because my homeroom teacher's sons wanted me to play. He wanted me to play in their band that played at school dances and all that, which was fun. Mm-hmm. And then a grown-up group needed me to play in their band, and they were going to sneak me in and out of their grown-up things to do that. And then on top of that, my mother dumped the church organist thing on me, because she was the church organist. She wanted me to take over at the church. So between all those three, I was a very busy musician at a very young age, and I had to quit my paper route, and that was the last job I've ever had, was that paper route, first and last. So
music literally has been your life then.
It's been all music the whole way through ever since. Yeah. But like I said, what was interesting is I would be able to improvise in the church. So, there's these little things where just play. You have to play for the offertory. You have to play for this. Just play something, and these other people would take up the music. I would just play. I mean, I would just make it up. Why do they have to know that it's not Brahms or not this or not that? They don't need to know. And I would just play, right. And they would love it. I figured, as long as nobody complains, I will create a new piece every time that offertory comes up, or that, communion, or these little bits in the church. Sure. So that was kind of the start of my actual improvising in front of people.
Now, let me ask you this. So in that place, especially in the church, there's this notion of being connected, right? Of being there to experience God, or whatever you want to call that energy. Did you recognize that there was that element internally and how it came out through your improvisation, or were you that aware of what was happening at the time? Did you just play and not think anything else?
Well, no, I was very much aware that what I was making up at that moment had specifically something to do with the moment in time, the people in the church, the fact that the ambiance of the church, that day, that moment, that time. So I was making a connection, along the lines of what you've been doing such wonderful work with this theme of your show. And, and I'm making this connection, and I was like, wow, this is kind of fascinating. And one time, the pastor, he started to catch on to it after a while, and he just announced to the church, like, this organist is doing something, he is doing something transcendent or, godly or whatever at this keyboard every time he does these improvisations. He started to notice that they were always different and they were always based on that moment, and everything was included, each person was making a difference in that music that would come out, because really the music's coming through you. You're kind of a conduit. And then I realized
about you, it comes from, I would say, just from the nothingness, right? From the energy that's there in the room, and you just happen to be able to connect with it. Now, that's a rare and unique gift. How well aware were you of that at that point in your life? Because I'm sure it occurred to you later, right? And you realized, hey, not everybody can do this. And as a kid, sometimes we think, oh, I can do this, so everybody else can too.
Right. Well, I wasn't sure I assumed that part of the reason I could do it was because I was musically proficient, at the keyboard. I studied and taken lessons, and I'd messed around. I was spending a lot of time at it because,
you can't
other
really
things.
improv until you know your scales and your rhythms and your time signatures and all those kinds of things. You have to have the technique down. This is one of the.
You have to draw from. Otherwise, you're basically, you're not much different than the cat who jumps on the piano for a couple of moments, just plays random anything.
Right.
So, yeah. So, but I was spending a lot of time at it because I also noticed that my family somehow got there was almost a little something drawn around that piano. It was almost like a safe space for me, and it become a safe space. And I was present and accounted for when I was at the piano. It was like, we need some leaves raked, but you can't take him away from the piano. When he gets up from the piano, you can ask him to split wood, rake leaves, whatever you want. But, you don't, we don't bother this person when he's the person. They just somehow, like an imaginary memo that I never wrote, was delivered.
Well, and they saw, as parents, I know for me, if it were my child, I would be just in awe that they have that kind of passion toward an instrument, any instrument, right? Because music, there is so much, and I'm also a progressive jazz drummer and love the improv side of it. It has a different sense to it. There's this understanding of a conversation that takes place beyond the norm through the music that the musicians open themselves up to. And granted, and I'm sure you've probably experienced it, you get a bunch of guys that are adept, or gals, and they're adept musicians, and you jump in and you just start playing. You don't think about, you don't talk about, you might kind of give okay, let's try it, let's go here, right? Let's take a little journey, and this is the destination, and you just play your way there. That kind of thing, how does that, in your opinion, translate to real life, and how we tend to kind of create these masterpieces, or maybe not so much so, in life, by how we learn the music of our own being?
Well, I noticed that, as this process went along, I started to notice that if I could transfer what I was doing musically into life, now I could raise the consciousness of my existence. You see what I mean? Because during the time I'm improvising, I'm allowing something to come through me, but it's, in other words, I'm kind of joining with more powerful forces to allow something to come through me. And that
you're joining, or that you've simply, I'll say, acquiesced to that energy? You kind of surrender to it and open yourself up rather than make a conscious choice to do so. Does that make sense?
I would say what you're saying is more accurate, but the result is we're all on the same team. You know what I mean? Like that.
We're all connected.
Right, we're connected. Whereas you know, these other aspects of life that are pre-programmed and, you know, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to be that, you're often cutting out this extraordinary possibility. You know what I mean?
Speaking of
All
the
of that.
possibility and coagulating them, right? I love my title as Possibilities Coagulator. It just fits super well in that progression. So the programming is the outer, right? It's been said we live half inside and half outside. Well, music comes from within, right? Especially the improv. So how does this bridge begin to dissipate the outer programming that we generally get? How did that work for you? And how might that also affect others to at least begin to just kind of take a look to see what the difference is?
Well, okay, so in other words, there's a spectrum, you know. So there's conventionality here, right? Conventionality, and musically that could be the form of a song, a specific song. As a drummer, you know, a blues form or something like that, where you're in a conventional form, and then you're playing maybe a conventional melody, a conventional beat, a conventional thing, and then the improvisation starts where you start to journey, you know, maybe and Eric Clapton, B.B. King, whoever, those solos, you know what I mean? Now we get to here, and now from here it can keep going. You can get out to where you perhaps go into the outer realms of that form, you know, which you'll hear jazz musicians do over a blues. They're adding substitutions and harmonies and harmonic tetrachords and all kinds of, you know, of embellishments. Okay, all of that, you're stretching it, you know. But now there's another aspect where you leave the form altogether, right? You leave that form. Now you're not even in the blues form anymore. You're out here somewhere. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And now you can be out here at different levels, where you're out here, but you're out here maybe in somewhat of a conventional way. Maybe you're in a tonal sense. You know, you have a tonal, you have a drone or something, like you'll hear in Indian music where they'll have one note, you know, or you'll have something that's a center, or you'll have
like a
tonality.
tambura or a sitar.
Exactly, perfect. So now you're out here, but guess what? You can get rid of tonality. You know, now you have things like, you know, the music of Arnold Schoenberg, and a lot of classical composers at the turn of the century started to do that. You know, they go into 12 tone or other tonalities. Now you're out this way. Now you're out that way. You know, so what I like to do, because I've studied all of those realms, what I'll sometimes do is I'll take someone on a journey from a complete, you know, sense of what would you say, familiarity,
Structure.
you know,
Structure.
familiarity, right?
Yeah.
And then I will reach them, you know, so that I can connect them with that and get out into this realm where, you know, really my subconscious is involved, my, you know, basic allowance is involved, just allowing something that's only unique to that time. Something I'll never be able to play again, no matter how hard I try.
Right. That's what I love about improv. It can be so exquisite in the moment, and sometimes it works that way, sometimes not. However, when it does, it's like, especially if you record it and listen back to it, it sounds like you've gone into the studio and been well prepared and rehearsed and just laid down tracks like you knew them. Right? It's just amazing how that happens. And like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who authored Flow, the psychology of optimal experience, what he akins that to is a jazz quartet in improv. Ego disappears, time disappears, you know, there's a merging, there's this urge to merge with that emptiness within all of you, so that you can all come out of that in your own perfect style that fits together in the conversation. And it's just, as you've mentioned, it's a phenomenal experience. So how did you then take that into the next phase that you began doing and find a way to bring that inner part of you into the outer world and connect others in the work that you're doing now?
Right. So becoming a musician, as I became when I had to give up my paper route,
Mhm.
I found myself using my skills because my basic idea was, because I loved all kind of music, was be able to play anything, be able to play all kinds of music, play in any kind of band, and then I could just work and play in all these different groups and all that stuff. Well, doing that led me to all kinds of wild and crazy places, and everywhere I went, I started to realize a basic theme, and that was that, music, unlike all these things I see on the news and all of these problems that you hear about and all of these other things, music, on the other hand, was literally doing the opposite in many instances. It was transcending the barriers
Well, it's been
that we.
said music is the language of the soul. So if we're all connected, that's at a soul level. So you would anticipate that this is where it would show up, and that I'd have to say almost opposite experience from the outer world happens in that musical configuration and on the fly composition, especially.
Absolutely. And so by the time of 9/11, which was a pivotal day for Jazz for Peace, because that's where Jazz for Peace actually started, on that day. By the time 9/11 had come around, I had traveled all over the world as a sideman with different bands, from the Artie Shaw Orchestra to the Platters to the opening act for Dizzy Gillespie, to my own groups and my own CDs. And I so many things I'd been to. And so by the time I was up on the roof of my 5th floor building in the Lower East Side, less than a quarter of a mile away from the Twin Towers, watching the spectacular experience of 9/11, I had a response that gave its own birth out of me. So basically, the only thing that I had was words that were coming out, flowing out of my being. So these words came out, they came onto a paper, and when 9/11 was finished, all I had was a piece of paper with words on it. And I never really considered myself a poet. I mean, more of a lyricist. I'd written lyrics to many different, songs and all that kind of stuff. But now I just had words. I had a poem, and the poem
Was the
was
feeling
called.
that you had in that, was it a sense of awe, despair? I mean, what was the combination of things that was going on inside of you as you were witnessing this?
Well, basically, it was like walking into a movie. It's like if you were sitting in the chair watching a movie, and you were able to just get up off of your seat and just walk into the screen. Because right now, I was in a movie. I was literally in it. It wasn't on a screen. I was in it, and I was watching it. And it was at that point that the realization came to me, whether I wanted it to or not, that this thing I've been thinking about, music being a transcending force and being able to address problems and heal problems, and perhaps heal our planet even, and maybe it has been healing our planet for all this time, but we needed to take it to the next step, was basically birthed at that moment. And so what I've been doing ever since is trying to live up to the word that I wrote on that piece of paper. That's all I've been doing since that morning.
Was it a short form or an entire page?
Well, it was basically a short, a short poem that basically said, I hear jazz for peace coming through the trees. In my heart, it fills me like a celebration. I see the light and I want to follow, inspired by the past contributions of those who came before and laid the groundwork for us to build on this universal language that is a gift for all mankind. When we speak it, people are inspired by the creativity and artistry that stands for peace and love and humanity and intelligence that leads to reaching potential that we have in our souls, so we can raise our total conscience and see that the gift of giving is our greatest privilege. So in order for me to live up to those, words, to start living up to those words, the very next thing I did, which was at least 2 weeks later, because the whole country was closed down, but I had when it opened at a gig where I just happened to be the headliner at a major jazz festival in Savannah, Georgia. So I was the headliner act. There was like 8,500 people there, and I read the words. And then those words, affected a lot of people that day. And word got traveled that I had read this poem on my show, and all these, these people were crying and all that kind of stuff. And when I got back up to New York State, the people the promoters of my next concert told me they'd heard about it, and was I going to put that to music by the time of that show? They kind of just put that bug in me,
That's great, Wick.
And
Now what are you going to do with it, right?
yeah, exactly. So then, while I was trying to figure out a way to get that to music, which I was able to do, a call comes in from a reporter who had written about me before. So I didn't know. He's like, "Hey, Rick." I was like, "Hey, yeah, how you doing?" And I didn't know what was going on. He didn't announce anything about it. He just started talking to me. Little did I know he was recording the conversation. And I just happened to say off the top of my head in that conversation, John or Jerry, I forgot his name, but when we fill our souls up with creativity, artistry, humanity, things of that nature, we have a better chance to avoid the behavior that leads to destruction. And I wouldn't even remember I said it if it hadn't come out in the article.
It is. Go ahead. I'm just triggered by, you've just edified where we put our attention, intention, and interaction. We live much more fully, especially when we allow that creativity to come forth, because it automatically seems to create connections with others. And as you've just demonstrated, that trickle through, it becomes a torrent.
Exactly. And so now that sentence, nothing to do with me. I mean, I never, that sentence starts appearing, just that sentence starts appearing on websites. And they're famous quotes websites. And it starts appearing as a famous quote with my name and, these websites. And I start finding out about it as the years go by. I mean, I see it on a website, and then I'll be looking for one thing on Google, and I'll be like, what the heck? I can't find what I'm looking for, but I'm like, what is that?
You keep showing up, right?
I keep showing up with this quote all over the place. I mean, it went viral all on its own, was lifted on its own from that article.
Well, isn't that evidence of the value and not, because a lot of times we think, oh gosh, I made this statement, and we like to see our name in lights, right? However, this is a much different experience of that came through you and organically then began to grow, as though, okay, Rick, we're going to nudge you down this path and just pay attention, right?
Right. And, coming full circle to what you were saying, what I was probably doing on that article, while I was talking to the guy, I didn't even know he was writing an article, but while I was doing in this conversation, I was just letting something flow through me like it does when I improvise.
Right.
I was just letting something flow, and those words just flew through me. I didn't calculate them. I didn't prepare them. I didn't get them ready. It wasn't a prepared statement. I just happened to say that. It came through me, and then it became a famous quote. So now, I mean, if you go on Google and
then
Rick
you stepped into it. This is, let me ask you a question. I like to consider modeling, right? Cognitive science is really one of the things that I've just been insatiably curious about my entire life. One of the things that I've wanted to do is try to explain how this attention, intention, and interaction takes place. So what you did with that quote is, I'm attempting to explain it anyway, it's like a tesseract, right? Where that quote went out from you, and then on the return, as that tesseract is wrapping around itself and pulling what is seeking you to you as you're seeking it, or you're acquiescing, you're just stepping into it, right? This is what I hear you saying. And am I getting that so far? Does that model kind of, I thought it was really, it just occurred to me just a couple of weeks ago in my exploration. It just popped into my head. I thought, wow, that's really kind of interesting, right? Because it's this constant throwing out and it embracing yourself. We don't realize what our intention does when we have an innocent, naive, service-oriented, kind of like a servant leader type experience where you just toss out this idea of hope or desire, And then it could be 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years, 20 years. Here it is showing up in front of you to step into. And you're like, oh, how did I do that?
Absolutely. Well, that's when I started to find that, as I was going along and learning and just, spend enough time on this planet, you start to get a few memos. And one of them is, if you just, be that, put that energy out there, all of a sudden it'll reach little people here and there that it'll connect with. And all of a sudden you'll find yourself, you can find yourself in a world of the beauty that you let flow out of you. You know what I
Isn't
mean?
that what, as I understand dating back to the Vedas and Rig Vedas up to current time, this is the experience that we have available should we so choose.
Exactly.
It's that choice that we have to constantly be aware of, and the distractions away from it, I suppose. And I would imagine at one point that the things that seem to, well, let me ask you this. Did you notice things that were attempting to distract, and yet that energy that was compelling you to move forward in this and the creation of it just kind of overrode everything?
Well, I noticed that it's a bit of a catch-22 because a lot of people, they think, well, if I just live that way, the way who I really am, and find my real self and be my real self, how do I know that it's going to, how do I know, they're not, they need to, it's a catch-22. You're not going to know until you do it. And if you don't do it, it's not going to happen. So they're blocking themselves. They want the answer before, they want to put a cart before a horse, ultimately. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have to trust, at some point you have to trust the universe, and you have to trust your connection to it.
That's the ultimate choice, is to trust and allow the universe, understand that it will, because it's universal law. You ask a question, you're going to get an answer, right? It may not, and the trick is not to try to think through a system built on vibration. You have to sense your way through it. And as a musician, you know exactly what that means, because you sense it at a very deep level, beyond the knowing, beyond the thinking. There's just this, apparently this movement that takes place, right, that continues to allow us to plan and strategize from a different place so that it's more optimally effective in the process. And those people, places, and things kind of show up to support that as you continue to do that. What are the types of things that showed up for you, and what did you notice about your request, usually silent, right, even a prayer, and how and when those things showed up? Can you think of a couple of examples that just would blow people away, or blew you away even?
Well, yeah, it did blow me away, because see, here I was with this knowledge. I knew deep down in my soul, because I had experienced it all over the world now, that music was a common denominator for bridging barriers and bringing people together, and maybe helping our world in a profoundly positive way. But I didn't know how it was all going to manifest, but I knew that it had a potential, because I saw it, when you played for people who didn't even speak your language, you would connect with them through music, and all of those things that music brings, and that I saw with my own eyes. So I didn't really have to question whether or not that was true, but how
the direct experience.
Right. So
hard to question that, right?
Yeah. I agree. So now I've got the poem, I've got the music, the press is written, DellaRatta starts out with jazz repeats. What am I going to do now? And I started to notice that the opportunities would just present themselves. In other words, you don't have to try, you have to allow the situation to present itself. So you had to keep yourself open, and just keep everything available, so that the next opportunity could present itself. And little did I know, it turns out that music is something that can help people in profoundly positive ways. And what better people to help than those who are helping others? Because if you're helping those who are helping others, you're not only helping those people, but you're helping their entire outreach. You're going to reach all the people that they're trying to reach by helping them. And that started our benefit concert series for outstanding causes, which came after a United Nations concert, which was the next idea that I thought of, bringing Israeli, Palestinians, and Americans together.
Right. Well, and that's how we got connected initially through LinkedIn and kind of exploring around and being the executive director for a global peace movement. It just seemed natural to somehow include Jazz for Peace in that. Now, granted, we're still in pre-launch stage and we're not quite ready to do that. However, that connection and now this conversation is a result of that. And I just am ecstatic about the possibilities.
Yeah, and I think you should be. Yeah, rightly so, because there's so much synergy. There's just an incredible amount of synergy between what you guys, your mission, what you stand for, and what Jazz for Peace is all about. So, it's never too early to learn and understand what we do and how we do it, so that you will see that you might be ready for our assistance even before you realize it.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I like, it seems that, with our philosophy of live and let live, right? We've got basically two principles, a moral and a legal principle, because you got to have both. The moral principle of be an excellent human allows us to have conversations around that to determine what that really means. And that's usually something that occurs kind of like music. There's an empathic resonance when people speak how they really feel and the connectedness of that. Then there's the other side of it, the legal principle, the let live side of things. And that's a long-term goal of removing aggression from the law for both individuals, clear through governments, and potentially we could even outlaw war as a result. Imagine that. It would seem that, probably most of the people on the planet would like to do that. However, there hasn't been a way for them to yet. So this is, that we're in that initial, like you were 20 years ago, and we're introducing this, and now we're finding that, oh yeah, there's others that resonate with this, and we're attracted to each other in order to join forces, right? And become much greater collaborators on a larger scale. And I find that not just fascinating, it's inspiring. And so how did you then, in the beginning of this, what did you find in the communities that would happen, and the people that you would meet and the connections you would have? And if you can even drill down to some finite details of a process where you were kind of imagining something and then it began to unfold in front of you.
Well, what we started doing was, we didn't know. We thought maybe there's a handful of nonprofit organizations in New York City, and maybe we'll help out 4 or 5 of them, and that would be the next little step that we do. Having no idea the magnitude of this.
A handful, more like hundreds, huh?
Yeah, well, I think there's even 60,000 nonprofit organizations registered just in New York City.
Wow.
So it's unbelievable how many organizations there are whose mission is to solve all of our world's problems. Could be solved if the most outstanding and dedicated ones were separated in a separate the wheat from the chaff sort of concept, which is what we try to do, and then helping those solve those problems, because these people are so passionate about it, and they're as passionate about what they do as you are with what you do, and I'm about what we do. So we help them, and you'll get a lot of these problems solved. So one day that kind of stands out, I remember we just we get an email from a woman, and she says, I've been looking at what Jazz for Peace does, and I just wanted to write you a letter and say, you're just really onto something amazing. Your whole concept of helping those who are helping. And she just writes this thing. And as we're reading it, we're not thinking about, wow, isn't that complimentary? We're thinking more, who the heck is that person? And boy, would we like to help her.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? What does she do? So we call the woman up and we're like, that was such a nice note. Thank you so much. Oh, I just, I really mean it, blah, blah, blah. Thank you. We really appreciate, but who are you? Because we want to know who they is. Because by that, what we were reading a person, this said, what she said about us said so much to us about her. You see what I mean?
Absolutely. I totally get it. And this is one thing that I think people don't realize. It's not your actions, your words speak more about you than they do about others. And for us to be able to see that and reflect it in a compatible, supporting, even, what's the word, loving way, right? Because this is where that stems from, is this essence of love. And I think, as far as humans are concerned, the two things that we want most, to love and be loved. And
Right.
this allows that process in a much larger way to take place, and not just between two people, it's a collective.
Right.
How do you see that collective growing, and what do you see it becoming in the near future? Because we've gone through a major shift in these last few years, beginning with the pandemic and people saying, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't feel right. And with the obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration, having the opportunity to self-examine as to why it didn't feel right, and then make some choices for change of their own. Do you see that? Do you see the results of that in a growth in what you're doing, or a shift in how people are operating in the process already in place?
Well, more and more people are waking up. And as they emerge from their awakeness, they're going to come to the obvious conclusions, as you have already come to and now have an organization based on it, that a lot of these things that we just take for granted are kind of illegal. I mean, war is just, the most ridiculous thing that I mean, what does it do for people? It does nothing for people. I don't know who it's benefiting, but there's nothing really legal about it. Nobody really consents to it. I mean, all of the the innocent people and the civilian casualties, I mean, it's just beyond. And then in order to justify these wars, they have to remove our rights, so we don't even know the truth about the devastation.
Right. Matthias
so
had an interview with Tucker Carlson. This has been, I don't know, 5-6 months ago, maybe. And Matthias is a Belgian professor, and he wrote a book about the marginalization of populations through the media, kind of like Howard Bloom did with the Lucifer principle. And in the interview, he said, what I've come to realize is that what people are really looking for is empathic resonance. And they're not finding it in the kind of smattering of material that we're being programmed with. And that's a key element, I think, in being able to move forward, is first that recognition is, this doesn't feel right. Well, what does? What are you finding that people that have been awakening or are awakening, and in your area of experience, what are they saying? How are they responding? What are they thinking about can be done as far as possibilities to coagulate in the near future?
Well, I think, we're not understanding what Jazz for Peace has known now from doing all these events, the extraordinary amount of common ground. I mean, when we, I was at an event once in Las Vegas, and I saw they had this PDF with all of the people who had come on board in support of this event and were even at the event. And I said to somebody, I said, I've seen that senator and this congressman like at each other's throats on the news. I said, oh yeah, they don't get along at all. I said, but they're both here. Yeah, oh yeah, they're both here. And they both made statements that are outstanding. You'd think that like they're both on every single word they're in agreement. You could take this guy's statement, put it here and put his there. You know what I mean? Yes, that's all true. I said, well, what, then why are they? They said, because they are on complete 100% common ground with what you are doing, which is supporting this outstanding cause in this community.
Now, why do you think we can't start that? Why is it so difficult to recognize that be in that place and operate from there rather than some kind of competitive projection?
The difficulty is that we found this because we've done over 850 of these events. And every time we do one, we think, you walk out of the event and you think the world the whole world is going to get me. It's so obvious.
Right.
You walk out to this vacuum where everybody else is, you know what I mean? And those people now, they've been like a rubber band like this, but they're going to be pulled back into this vortex of this vortex of division. It's like a vortex of division. And the problem is like this woman who made the comment when we called her up, she said, well, I'm working with an organization that helps women go to school in suburbs of China. And I said, wow, what's the problem with that? She said, because the parents don't see any value of it and they don't want to put money towards the girls. And these are poor actions of China. We think of China now, we don't think of them as poor. But at the time, we're talking about the suburbs of China, not the big cities, right. Very poor. And they would not send their kids to school, the women would not get educated, and they would actually go and convince them that they would pay for the education. And even when they paid for the education, it was a struggle to get these girls educated. Once they showed proof of the results of the woman's education, then it was different. But getting up to that point, that's what she was doing. And I was like, well, where are you guys looking? So when we took the woman's comment that she sent to us, we took her comment and we grew it into funds. And that's what we do with an empowerment tree. And this could be done. There could be 1,000 Jazz for Pieces in the world doing what we do 1,000 times over. I mean, if you took this and you multiplied it, you know, you could, you know what I mean? It would be unbelievable.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, and just off the top of my head, I'm a systems guy, right? I like a holistic view of things and follow up and being able to, okay, we've done this, now what, right? Mm-hmm. What's the follow-up? Are there organizations, or do you have an organization or people that follow up and work with these different organizations to make sure, or to help them take their own organization to the next level afterwards? Or are you just too busy with what you're doing? Is there a gap there?
Well, that's an important question. Basically, once you become a Jazz for Peace Empowerment Grant recipient, you are in a family of, you know, all of these other organizations. They're all people just like you. It's almost like going to an Al-Anon meeting. If someone in your family was an alcoholic, you know, you right. Walk into a meeting and you're like, you don't even need to say anything to each other, because like I know what, oh my God, I can look at you and know what you've been through by that alcoholic, you know, parent or sibling or whatever. Sure. Do you know what I mean? They're all clung together with this spectacular understanding of what they've all been through. They don't hardly even need to talk about it. You know, that's what happens with this, because these organizations are all separated from the dog and pony show nonprofits. You see what I mean? Of where they're, you know, thrown in. And the dog and pony show guys win because it's some multi-millionaire who's just putting on a show for himself to look like he's something that he's not. You know what I mean?
I mentioned Howard Bloom's book, excuse me, The Lucifer Principle. And just for the audience sake, if you don't want to read it, the essence of it is that he did a scientific study of history and how a few people manipulated populations by telling lies and controlling the media stream. And nothing else was available. So outright lies became truths in the public's mind over time. So this has been a repetitive pattern that those with wealth and power have been able to do, and it's become a profit over people and planet agenda rather than a people and planet over profit agenda. So how do you see that beginning to shift in greater ways with the activities that Jazz for Peace and the trickle through from there is happening?
Well, when you said the word trickle, that's very important, because ultimately we need to go from a trickle down economy, okay, which is absurd. The whole concept is just beyond absurdity, and yet we buy into it so readily, to a trickle up economy where those who are going to do the great work to mend our world, okay, get the money first instead of last. And then
Well, and in the U.S. right now,
say it again.
I was just going to say, to edify that point, in the U.S. right now, I was a high school teacher for almost a decade. Arts, crafts, home ec, auto shop, all the things that are necessary for, building healthy communities, they're all gone.
Right.
And
That's what
or at
happens.
least not all, but they've been severely diminished. So how can we, as parents, as educators, as grandparents, as great grandparents, I've got 6 great grandkids, how can we make this possibility of re-energizing our basic population? How can we make that happen? And music, I believe, is one of the key elements to do so. Music, culture, this understanding of connectivity that even now quantum physics or quantum theories are demonstrating is true. The science is backing it up.
Are you familiar with, have you ever heard of the fourth turning by any chance? The fourth turning?
The fourth?
It's a fourth turning. It's an 85 to 90 year cycle, of which there's a first, second, and third. When you get to the fourth turning, it's a time of war. Whether you're in a war or not, you feel like you're in a war. And it's
Kind of like the Kali Yuga.
Yeah. So basically, a situation happens where things get so backwards, they literally get upside down, and you can solve the problems by going like that. The solution literally to go like that.
Well, I wonder if that's what the polar shifts on the Earth was all about. It's tired of us being, not so nice to each other. And of course, this is in its own cycle too. And in looking at those things, it's hard not to think about what are the patterns here and what are the repetitive cycles and how long do they last and when can we anticipate a better, result.
Well, realization is one of them. And, a lot of people, what happens is they get into denial and then they get into almost like a stage where they need almost an intervention. They become intervention candidates. And most of us are literally candidates for an intervention because not too many people want to realize that we are engulfed in regulatory capture. We're engulfed. Everything that you see is captured. So, as you continue to walk around with blinders, the situation just piles up worse and worse and worse. It's kind of like if you're treading water in a stream, you're going back a mile every an hour if you don't swim forward. You know what I mean? And that's what we're doing. We're just going backwards, backwards, backwards until we wake up. And so, you can't clean the ocean, this is a disaster, has massive dead zones. You can't even get fish anymore in the wild. You have to, get it from these factory farms where they take a toxic fish from the Baltic Sea and they make food pellets and they feed those fish, which pollute those waters in Norway or, all kinds of crazy stuff. But all of this stuff, if you try to, save the fish, well, you'll end up with a fish nonprofit that's funded by the toxic fish company. Do you know what I mean? So
Right.
It's captured. So we have to realize those kinds of things. Fortunately for Jazz for Peace, we have autonomy. So we have the autonomy. We don't have a donor that says, you know what, I'm giving you this money, but you can only fund who I want you to fund. The beautiful thing about Jazz for Peace is anybody can follow the easy steps at any stage of their development and can follow the easy steps and confirm a Jazz for Peace event at no cost to you. And that's amazing. I know you're early in the nonprofit stage, but I'm sure as a musician, putting on a fundraiser is an extraordinary cost. You get a free fundraiser with Jazz for Peace, but that's only, I would say, 1/4 of it, because 3/4 of it is the staffing, the event coordinator experience, the guidance, and all of the things that it takes to make that event a success.
I am well aware of that, and thank you for mentioning that because I don't know that many people are. One of the other hats that I wore in my earlier life was event manager for 2 different events, the Tempe Arts Festivals and the Tuxedo's Block Party, both of which drew 250,000 people over 3 days and 250,000 people in one night for the block party, with 5 stages, not just one. So there were 5 of us that did all the logistics for that. And I had a blast. I seemed to be able to step in the middle of chaos and enjoy it, where most people would freak out. Because there's things that, you know, you look for things that need to be done, you just go do them, and eventually you run out and everything's fine. Right?
Exactly. So, you know, when someone gets involved with Jazz for Peace, it starts now with a comment from that day forward, because that woman sent us a comment and we took that comment and we literally grew it into funds for her. And actually, what she has been doing, that problem doesn't even exist anymore in China. They were so successful at it that they cured it. Unlike successful situations in America where we only treat it and we try to keep the problem going so we can keep treating it and all that, they actually solve the problem of these people. You know, if you go to the sub-rural areas of China, they don't have that opinion anymore about the girls. So, you know, we ended up doing 4 events for her because, you know, her comment was so incredible that we were easily able to put it into a 1-page of what Jazz for Peace wants to do for this outstanding cause, how we can help them get from where they are now to where they need to be through what a Jazz for Peace concert brings. 1, it thanks, rewards, and brings together your supporters. 2, it expands your donor base by allowing those supporters to bring people as VIP guests of honor to the event at the VIP level. It expands their donor base. 3, it now enables us with that foundation to get sponsors at the local level, so that each organization is now in touch with other businesses in their community that sincerely believe in what they're doing to make their communities better or their world better or their mission. And at the same time is helping their own business by connecting with them by their growth, growing with them over the years. Now you've got another branch. These are now branches of the tree, publicity and awareness, that makes them more publicized. You know, more people find out, hey, I didn't even know, I lived down the block. I didn't even know you guys were here. Like, what's going on? Like, how long you been here? How come I didn't know? You know, that's publicity and awareness. You can go on with other branches such as national sponsors, new and prestigious supporters, fundraising techniques that we've learned and passed along from the Red Cross and all these other, you know, Habitat for Humanity, et cetera. And it creates something called an empowerment tree. And that's the sustainable thing that this organization can move forward with, you know, in so many fronts.
Now, it sounds like you kind of started about the same time that there's an organization out of Malibu called Social and Environmental Entrepreneurs. And they began probably about 25 years ago, I'm guessing. I met a gentleman named Max Gale, who played Wojciechowicz. You're probably familiar with Max. Wonderful gentleman. And I worked with C, right? It is the acronym for it, for a number of years. And I tried to bring that concept back into Phoenix with not a whole lot of results. The concept being, we've got a nonprofit situation here. How can we help you? And you guys can raise funds, use our nonprofit. We'll do the administrative side of things for you, and you can go out and do what you do without feeling like you're being strapped to be able to do it. Now, why do you think that the resistance to that kind of an umbrella type situation, why do you think that resistance? And of course, this was 20 years ago. I don't know. I haven't tried it again yet. So we're attempting to with Live and Let Live. So do you think that competitive nature is still present in nonprofits, or do you think that they're beginning to be more open to each other? Because it's all a fight for dollars.
Well,
right.
Yeah, I think the fight for dollars has divided them instead of united them. And what they need to realize is they're fighting for dollars in a pool that needs to be expanded, that they don't even realize should be much larger. It's kind of like the Mike Tyson quote, you know, when he talks about his other boxers, they're great friends, but now comes time to make a living, and it's like 100 pigeons trying to get one saltine cracker, you know?
Right.
And so people
Or
are,
like a scene in, what is it, One, right?
Mhm.
Where Jet Li's at the top of the pack and everybody else trying to knock him off.
Right. And so it's almost like a trap that's been created. See what we're trying to do, if you have a whatever a $600 billion GDP, then technically there's $600 billion of available if people's hearts and minds can be involved in it. Do you know what I mean? And too many people are involved. Too many people deep down in their soul, they want to make their world better on a Friday or Saturday night, but instead they go where they've been manipulated by, some powerful agency or whatever, subliminal messages. They go and they do something stupid and destructive to them. Somebody profits who's not going to do anything good with that money.
I just wonder, and maybe you can reflect on this, is that programming, and I get the Friday and Saturday night, help others kind of thing. I really believe that our nature is to want to help each other, and that this programming has caused us to pull back from that. Do you see a shift in that outside of the Jazz for Peace community, at least in a small scale, since you've begun? Or is there, and granted, you guys have a huge throw around the planet, even outside of that, as you look at those that you haven't touched yet, what do you think their flavor is? Are they ready to step up given the opportunity? Or are they still in a mode of questioning the authenticity, which many do, right? Because a lot of the nonprofits don't use the money for the service that they say they do.
Well, I think, I didn't know that these amazing people existed in the world before I started Jazz for Peace. I had no idea. I just knew the people, maybe on the famous quotes page, maybe they were amazing, maybe Gandhi, maybe the people also on those quotes when I would go to the famous, those people were amazing, but I don't know who else, I know a couple of people that I think are as outstanding, but I didn't know. As I started to meet these organizations, I started to realize I don't know who all the amazing causes are, and they don't know either. So even that person you mentioned, I don't know who he is, and probably just as horrific, he doesn't know who Jazz for Peace is. So, when you look at the situation of those that are impacting us and oppressing us, they're very well organized. We have to get at least half as organized as they are. You know, if you look, you see stuff like this Jekyll and Hyde, Jekyll Island. You see how all these bankers got together on Jekyll Island. Well, they all got together. They flew into this island. They met privately. They did this, they did that, and they created what is now the Federal Reserve. They were way organized than we are. Do you know what I mean? With this situation, every one of us should be taking advantage of every opportunity out there, which means, I would think all these organizations should not only know what Jazz for Peace is, but start going through the easy steps. So send your comment in so we can show you. There's only 3 steps. One of them is a comment. So that's, like I told you, that woman, that became step 1 of the empower to grow the tree. That's a seedling. What we do is we take that comment. Everyone should send us their comments so we can take it and attempt to grow it into roots, which is step 2. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then step 3 is to take those core roots and expand them, like I said, we do by growing your donor base and growing your fan base. And that
get into the mitochondria network, right?
Yeah. And so that all by itself creates a confirmed event at no cost to you, which our team moves forward once the event is confirmed to grow that empowerment tree. And there's no reason not to do it. Really, I don't know of any reason. If everyone starts doing that, then I'll know that we're making an attempt to compete with the organization of those who oppress us.
Sure. And then hopefully and granted, with the tenure you've been doing it, any success in life, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and decades at times, and people, the overnight successes, no, those really aren't the case.
Right.
It's set up and it's strategized, and there is some luck involved, right? There's that connection that takes place. Now,
Well, and luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So just to have that luck to start out with, you've got to be prepared for the opportunity. Because if the opportunity comes and you're not prepared, we're screwed.
Can't take advantage of it.
That's right. Exactly.
Right. So speaking of taking advantage, and with each one of these events kind of being like its own improvisational show, right?
Right.
You do some improvisational stuffs in your interviews, and I don't want to let that pass us by, or for the opportunity of that. And it's funny you mentioned this would be your 51st. I was told years ago by a mixed blood Cherokee friend of mine that you cannot join or form your own council in their tradition until you're 51. And I thought that was a very profound and exquisite piece of wisdom that not many people think about in the process.
That's phenomenal. Can you repeat that one more time, just because that's amazing?
Sure. In Native tradition, and I know it's for the Cherokee, and I'm guessing it's probably ubiquitous in some form, that you cannot join or form your own council until you're 51. So it's interesting. I was up on the Hopi Res many years ago, and we had a 40-year-old guide that was kind of taking us around to some places I hadn't been yet. And in the process, he was saying that he was trying to get in to talk to the council, and they kept snubbing him. And so I said to him, well, and here's a white guy talking to a native, right, sharing this information. And he said, that makes total sense.
Wow.
And yet that understanding hadn't had the right inquiry, the right question he asked. He just was feeling like he was being snubbed rather than seeking the reason why. But when I said to him, that information, I just said, we both had a good laugh over that, and the fact that it was a cross-cultural sharing, right? And so that was pretty cool. So how do you see this kind of taking place and in this improv, and maybe kind of set your piece up and dive in and see what this 51st version has to offer?
Yeah. Well, it's so phenomenal because when as we had to get postponed because of that water issue you had,
right.
And that was supposed to be on a Sunday, and I was going to take a song, which I'll do anyway. It's called A Sunday Kind of Love. It'll be called A Wednesday Kind of Love today. But I was going to just take this little standard and show you how it can go from there and out, and who knows to where. I don't know. I won't know until we do it, but it will start out there and it will go exactly like I've been describing. Whether it goes to here or to here, we just don't know. It's up to the universe. It's up to everything. It's up to the moment in time. It's up to your participation as a listener, the potentiality of the people who will hear it. We don't know. Everything's going to play a part in this. And the amazing thing was, I thought, well, geez, we missed the 50th. Because I kind of thought of you for the 50th because it's a pinnacle number,
right.
But I'm gonna have to be honest and say 51. And it turns out there's a numerological, you know what I mean, the semblance for that. So that's amazing. And not only that, but you brought up American Indians. And the thing is, some of our most amazing stories are with indigenous people, not only around the world, but with tribes here in the United States. I've been to places like Page, Arizona is a beautiful place we've been. I know you're in Arizona. We've, of course, been to Tucson and Phoenix and those places, Glendale a few times. But we were helping one outstanding cause in Las Cruces. That was 3 tribes, and we did 2 events for them. And during the time that we did those events, they went from like nowhere to second on the list of organizations of tribes that were going to be recognized by the government and could now, have their little museum and their history and be recognized. But we've done stuff in Landier, Montana. We've done stuff for the Cheyenne. I mean, amazing things where I've had elders, come and spend the day, ask me to spend the day with them and just tell me all these amazing things, right, spiritual and all that. So that's all leading up to what I'm going to do now, which is again, it'll start out with a song, Etta James song, recorded by Etta James, called "The Sunday Kind of Love," and it'll stretch out from there into a free improvisation. It's called Free JA because the word jazz, I found out, is misspelled when I went to Haiti. It's really JASS, not JA, because it's a Creole word. So I took the S's off because it was misspelled. I took out the Z's off because it was misspelled. The S's, nobody knows it's JASS. Now we have Free JA, which speaks to my interest in freedom of speech, in the need to not bomb civilians, all of the things that this issue is standing for. And so this is the 51st version of that that's going to come out of this little standard, and we'll see what happens.
All right, sounds great. And off we go.
I want a Sunday kind of love. Love to last past Saturday night. I'd like to know it's more than love at first sight. I want a Sunday kind of love. Do my Sunday dreaming, know my Sunday scheming, every minute, every hour, every day. I'm hoping to discover a certain kind of lover who can show me the way. My arms need someone to unfold. Give me a warm wind when days grow cold. I love for all my life. Heavy and true. I want a Sunday kind of love.
All right. Well, that went a lot of places with that one. Right?
Yeah.
Kind of reminded me of some old Otis Peterson stuff. Does that name ring a bell?
Which one? Oscar Peterson?
Or
No.
Oscar Peterson. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, Oscar Peterson, yeah, I mean, he was one of the masters of swing, no doubt about it.
Right, right, right. Yeah, one of our friends here locally was a kind of protege of Oscar's. His name's Charles, and he's still plays with a lot of Alzheimer's, plays jazz piano for Alzheimer's patients and musical therapy kind of stuff. I think he just turned 90 or something like that. He's still going. It's amazing. So speaking of still going, and we're kind of closing in on our time. Given all of these things and your experience and the reality that of direct experience that you've had, can you offer or suggest something for our listeners to actually incorporate on a daily basis or even a moment-to-moment observation, engagement, thought series or something like that that could benefit their lives as this awareness has yours?
Absolutely. You know, I was asked recently by a print, a company, a print company contacted me and they said, listen, we want to do an article on you and we want to list, this article is the 5 things that make Rick DellaRatta happy. You know, not that I knew I was happy, but they wanted to know what makes me happy. They must have assumed I was somewhat happy anyway. So I said, okay, I'll do. I've never done anything like that, but it says that, you know, 5 things. Just tell us 5 things that make you happy, and you know, expound on each one with a small paragraph. So you know, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and what I did is I took a sentence and I plugged something different in each one. So I said, you know, number 1, I said, find a philosophy that works for you. And I don't know, this is just out of my own, you know, just out of the blue. I didn't know that I felt that way, and I didn't know I would say that number 1. But when I said it, just the first one that came to mind, find a philosophy that works for you. And then I put, listen, you know, you find it. It's got to be whatever philosophy. Study different options, but find one that works for you and do it. The one that happened to work for me, or it's been working for me lately, is Stoicism, which is those, you know, Marcus Aurelius. They found all of his writings, and you know, most of it's based on writings that they found that he never wanted to be published. It's just things that he wrote to himself over his 32-year reign as the Roman emperor. And then they had these other guys, Seneca, and these other guys that also contributed, you know, Epictetus or whatever. They all made a little bit. But you know what? I find little things in there that put things into perspective. You know, one of them obviously is a beautiful one. It's like, don't get all upset over that which you cannot control. That can save you a lot of energy right there, because, you know, you can't control. There's nothing to do. Yet you're going to torture your whole day for what? You know, you can't control it. Might as well get upset over something you can control and then fix it. You know, that's
the only thing that you really can control is your choice and how you respond to the things that come at you.
Right. And another really, there's a, you know, at least a handful of amazing ones, but another kind of
That's an
interesting
awesome
one I thought, yeah, another one was really to not necessarily be dependent on giving yourself credit for something. Do that good thing, but don't get all wrapped up on, you know, getting the credit or whatever, because all of us are going to be overlooked in life and all of our great things. But you know what? We can find inner strength in what we've done and what we know that we did. And not only that, we don't have to even credit ourselves. I mean, when we talk about music making, hey, I'll credit myself for the time I put in practicing. But when it's time to make something happen musically, hopefully I'm allowing something to come through me, which I might be crediting a higher being if I was going to credit somebody anyway. So if someone wants to overlook my contributions, fine with me. It's really a higher being that I'm allowing to come through.
And I think that happens in life for all of us when we give ourselves the opportunity for that to happen. And Rick, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation. Great to get to know you better and to go deep into those realms that often aren't traveled well, if they are at all. And I really appreciate your time, the energy, and the effort that you're making in the world to make it a better place. And I look forward to continued engagements.
Thank you so much, Zen, and it's so great to meet you this way. You know, just like I meet our grant recipients, I'm meeting wonderful people like you now, and looking forward to our journey.
Awesome. And namaste and in la catch. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I will see you next time.